We're going to get into some of the big questions in life in this one, like why is the sky blue? And how many holes does a straw have? Which armrest is yours if you're flying economy, like in a middle seat? And then the big one, how much gold and silver should we all own? Now, these are tough questions. We might have to focus on that last one. How much gold and silver should you own? It's a question that's coming up again. I'm not sure why, but I've covered this one at least once before. Rather than point back to a video from last year or the year before that, though, I'm going to give it another shot. Now, this goes without saying that this is only my opinion. I'm not a financial advisor, but what I will tell you is that I don't overhype gold and silver here. I don't push anyone to buy it. I don't push anyone to buy more of it. I just think that it has practical applications, and I'll get into that side of it. Now, I've been buying both for more than 15 years now. I think I have a pretty realistic view on it. I mean, I have a YouTube channel devoted to this stuff, but I'm not weird about it. I promise. This one is going to be a non-weird take on the question. Before we get back to it, if you're looking for precious metals, hit up SD Bullion. New customers even get gold and silver for spot. It's sdbullion.com/new. So let's start with the variables because they're important. You have age, income, debt, whether or not you have kids, where you live. There are a lot of factors that are going to be specific only to you, and those factors are going to change over your lifetime. Now, I think 3 ounces of gold, that's a great emergency fund. Maybe you've heard me say that before. I think 40 ounces of silver is also good to have. Now, is that good information? I don't know. Well, at 24, that might have been enough for me. But at 48 now, with kids, with travel, and all the things that I have going on in my life, well, I could burn through 3 ounces of gold and 40 ounces of silver pretty quickly. There's just no single number that's going to make sense to all of us without considering our variables. And we could try percentages. We've probably all heard 10% of your portfolio, maybe 5% of your net worth should be held in gold. I would say we still need to consider a few individual factors before coming up with a number or a percentage. I mean, age is a big one. Just getting started in your career, getting ready to retire, already retired, that will affect how relevant those percentages are to each of us, but percentages are at least closer. In statistical figures, again using percentages, it's always interesting. Knight Frank just released an annual wealth report and it told us that the ultra wealthy have 3% of their net worth in gold. That's net worth outside their primary residence. And I think that that's interesting. If the ultra wealthy feel that they need a fallback in gold and they're willing to admit it, I think that says something. And we still haven't gotten to anything useful to us, though. Us meaning those of us who aren't ultra wealthy. Because if you are in that category, well, you probably have a family wealth team and you shouldn't be listening that closely to me. Now, let's just get a use case on the table here. For most of us, gold is meant to be a rainy day fund. And when I say rainy day fund, that rain is probably more like fire and brimstone rain than Monday afternoon shower rain. We lose our job, we get sick. We need something that we can't cover with whatever we have sitting in our checking accounts or our savings accounts. And if we never run into that personal SHTF situation, well, whatever we have goes to a future generation. You hand it down to your kids. Or it just supplements a better retirement. It all depends on what you're planning for. But we need to get to a general use case so that we can answer this in a meaningful way. I mean, if gold is your only hobby, nothing else gives you joy, well, maybe you need a little bit more than a person who doesn't have the dragon sickness, someone who's just wondering how much they need and why. So the way that I've come up with my own number is to look at my minimum monthly expense, or at least the minimum amount that I would need to supplement monthly needs. What would I need to get me through a month? And giving that specific figure isn't really helpful here because your number is what's important, not mine. But let's just pick some numbers. Maybe it's $2,000 a month. Maybe it's $4,000. Maybe it's $8,000. I don't know. But there's a point where knocking out short-term debt is going to compete against a gold buying budget. So if your monthly expense is $8,000 or $10,000 or $12,000, maybe there's some debt that should be knocked down. Again, I'm not a financial advisor, but it's something to consider. Something we can say, though, is that the average household expense here in the United States is $5,400 $577. So just to move this along, let's say a family might need $4,000 in rainy day funds to get through a month if something bad drops on us. And that just happens to work out to be 2 ounces of gold. So easy math, 2 ounces of gold is $4,000. And don't worry, we'll get to silver in a minute. So if we would possibly need that $4,000 a month to get us through a bad one, well, how many months would be important to plan for? We've all heard that we should have 3 months of expenses and savings. The older among us probably have heard 6. Now, I would say gold is outside of that need. 3 to 6 months in expenses should be your normal rainy day fund. Again, not financial advice. I can't give it. That's just traditional planning that most of us have probably heard. Now, I see gold as something that I'd only dig into if my traditional rainy day fund wasn't enough. So how long might a really bad event last? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? Well, if it was a year and you had 6 months expenses already covered in cash savings and you needed $4,000 a month to get through each month, well, 2 ounces of gold a month times 6 months would be 12 ounces. So 12 ounces of gold might be how much gold you should own. Simple, we just solved it. For fun though, do the math on 10% of your portfolio or 5% of your net worth. Would 12 ounces of gold be a 5% hedge in your portfolio? That would mean your portfolio would be $240,000. 5% would mean that you have a $480,000 net worth. Does that make sense? Maybe. Now, I don't like percentages of net worth for personal planning. I think it's interesting academically as a marker for what the Joneses might be doing, but I would rather stick to the use cases. And that 3% for the ultra wealthy in that report, well, 3% of tens of millions, hundreds of millions, whatever, is still a lot of gold. Now, personally, I want 2 years of expenses covered. So I'm not talking about 3 months or 6 months. I'm talking about 24. So 24 times whatever my number is, we'll just call it 4,000, stick to what we were using. I would need around 100 ounces of gold. And I think that that type of planning is just more useful than figuring out a line in a personal financial statement. Now, another consideration here is whether or not that's physical gold and silver. Personally, I like the Fire and Brimstone Rainy Day Fund to be physical. I promised I wasn't going to be weird about this, so I won't dive into bank mistrust or any reason other than simply wanting to have direct access to an emergency asset. I've been talking mostly about gold, but this is a good segue into silver because to me, silver has a basic utility that gold lacks. You could hypothetically use it for small transactions and use it inside small windows of time. Say the power was down. You might be able to use a silver eagle to get some gas, get some food. Now, your mileage is going to vary greatly here, but I like the idea of having 40 to 100 American Silver Eagles on hand just for that use case. Quick, small purchases. Now, if you think silver is the better metal to store your overall wealth, you like it better than gold, well, that's your prerogative. And you just do the same math I was doing with gold, where $2,000, that would be 80 ounces of silver rather than 1 ounce of gold. $4,000 would be 160. And if you're using the numbers that I was giving, 24 months of $4,000 would be 3,840 ounces of silver. Don't call me crazy, but that seems like a lot of silver to have on hand. That's a 263-pound rainy day fund. All of these numbers have been for example purposes only. I think what it comes down to is figuring out a basic use case. And I don't think it gets any more basic than monthly expenses. So as much as I'd like to just say everyone should own 3 ounces of gold and 40 ounces of silver, I think it's more complicated than that. There was actually a time when 3 ounces of gold would have helped me through 3 months of expenses. That and the 40 ounces of silver, that was an actual amount that I came to for how much gold and silver I should own at that time. That doesn't make it universally applicable though. I've said this before in a prior video, probably 2 or 3 prior videos. Something I'd add here though is that having 3 ounces of gold while having, say, $6,000 in credit card debt kind of cancels out a lot of the benefit. Now, I only mention this because I see a lot of doom scenarios getting airtime around here. And if I hear that question, how much gold or silver should I have? Sometimes I wonder if it's coming because a person saw one of those videos, they need gold or silver to survive a coming storm, something like that. I need to point out here that doom is not a new trick. It's kind of the oldest trick in the book to get your attention. So your answer to how much gold and silver you should own hopefully isn't coming because you just saw a video where someone is telling you the end is near. Those people will always be there. They'll always be telling us that it is. So I would just say, look at your practical use cases, run it through the math that I mentioned, and then listen to your gut. If 48 or 100 ounces of gold seems crazy to you, it might just be. 3 ounces doesn't feel like enough. Well, same thing. The only person who can answer the question, of course, is you. So let's call it good there. Help us all out with some gut checks. If you have a formula that's worked well for you, I think we'd all like to hear about it. So let us know. And then while you're in the comments, be sure to hit that like button. If you found any of this interesting, be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you'd like to see more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.